It is lunchtime and you could have been anywhere else today but with us, and you have chosen to spend your lunch hour with us. So we are thankful. We are really glad that you could join us for this important conversation. We're going to open up with a word of prayer. So if you can just get in a posture uh, of prayer and do whatever that's comfortable for you at the moment. Father God, we want to thank you for this time together to discuss such an important conversation, Lord. Please be with all the participants, be with the panelists, everyone who is viewing this discussion. We pray that it is impactful and that it touches someone in a very special way. Amen. So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Ajwa Ray, and I am the president and CEO of Women of Praise. Women of Praise is a nonprofit organization that provides spiritual support to women of color working in politics as they seek to find purpose and fulfillment in their careers. We are so very proud to partner with the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Northern Virginia chapter on this important discussion, Breaking the Silence, Black Women and Suicide. Today, we are going to have a long overdue and much needed conversation about suicide among Black women. We're going to identify the risk factors and the warning signs and some protective factors for suicide, and also learn how women of faith can play an active role in suicide prevention in our communities. I'd like to just say that this event is for informational and educational purposes only. We do not provide medical advice of any nature. The information and the materials provided during this event is not intended to serve as a substitute for medical advice. Participants are encouraged to consult a medical professional or healthcare providers if they are seeking medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And I would like to introduce our wonderful panelist. I'll start with my sister, Felicia Johnson. Felicia Johnson is a licensed clinical social worker. She is a proud graduate of Fort Valley State University with a bachelor's degree in social work. She received a Master of Social Work degree from the University of Georgia with an emphasis in school social work and community empowerment. Felicia has worked in a variety of settings to include child protective services, schools, military installations, and community mental health agency. She is the owner of Soothing Minds PLLC Counseling and Consultation Services. She's a proud military spouse and the mother of 2 beautiful children, and also a member of Women of Praise. And we are so glad to have you with us today, Felicia. Thank you so much for joining us. We are also excited to welcome another Women of Praise member, Ms. Lauren Relaford. Lauren is the political director at Sojourners. Lauren is responsible for developing and implementing the organization's policy, strategy, positioning, framing, messaging, and advocacy for outreach and impact on Capitol Hill and the presidential administration. She is a passionate and mission-oriented public and population health professional focused on bridging the gap between social theory, spirituality, research, and practice to the forefront of our major policy decisions. She's a native of DC and earned her BA in political science from Boston College and her MSW in social policy clinical social work at the National Catholic School of Social Services at the Catholic University of America, where she focused primarily on biological impacts of trauma in high risk and vulnerable populations. Lauren is also a suicide survivor, and she has been so courageous and brave to share her story. And we are so thankful to have you with us today. So welcome, Lauren. So we're going to go ahead. We have a bit under an hour. So we are going to go ahead and begin the conversation. And I'd like to start with some questions for you, Felicia,
Okay.
to just help us understand this issue. What is suicide?
Suicide is the act of killing yourself intentionally.
Okay.
So taking your life and wanting to do it on purpose with the mindset of, I want to take my life away.
Okay. So what are the risk factors? If you can share the risk factors and some of the warning signs with us, that'd be
I'm
great.
glad you asked. There are like so many, I want to do the risk factors first. As a mental health professional, when we scan and all our clients will assess them for any suicidal history. So one of the risk factors that we look for is any suicidal history. Have you attempted suicide before in the past? Like how many times? Like how old were you? What were your triggers when you did do it? Another thing is sometimes people have undiagnosed mental health issues that they haven't even addressed. So that's a risk factor. We also got the environmental of just trauma, people having access to die by suicide, whether it's through medication laying around the house, having guns. Another thing is job loss, or just a loss of grief, a loss of relationships. Those are other issues that can impact, along with health issues. If you have a chronic pain or you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And we also got to talk about this maternal moods disorder, being pregnant, just having a baby. Those are some risk factors too.
Thank you so much. So how does suicide, we don't talk in the Black community, even as Black women, we don't talk a lot about suicide. I can just probably think of maybe 2 conversations I might have had about suicide, just intentional conversations that I may have had with a friend or a colleague, a coworker, about suicide. So it's a conversation that we don't have. And I'm not sure how many of us are aware of how suicide actually affects Black women in particular. If you can share with us how it affects Black women in particular, and then also what are some of the reasons that Black women commit suicide?
Yeah. I think one thing is, black women is this myth. You got the myth of being a strong Black woman, and a lot of times and having the Black magic, Black girl magic power. So I feel like when we have those myth of we got the Black girl magic power, we go along with that. It's okay. I cannot be weak. I cannot be vulnerable. I can't let people know how I'm really feeling. I have to always put on a mask. I think a lot of Black women have put on this mask before of, okay, I have it together. Even when they go to the doctor's office, sometimes when they go to the doctor's office, most doctors are scanning or assessing for anxiety and depression and suicidal. But I know even for myself, my daughter, she went off to college. That was really tough for me. And even though I was crying before I went into that doctor's office, but once I stepped foot, I was like, you know what? I got to get together. I put my makeup on.
Game face on, right?
Yeah, I put my game face on. And so when they asked, how have I been feeling depressed? I'm like, oh, I might scored it a 1, even though I know it was a 3 or a 4. So just being able to be vulnerable, to really be honest with our feelings, to say, hey, no, I'm really having a hard time with this. I'm struggling. I need help with this. Because when you go to the doctor's office and you score a 1 or 0, it's like they're going to gloss over that. Oh, yeah, you good. Oh, you really good.
Yes, that's such a good point. So what are some of the reasons that you've heard of or read or studied? What are some of the reasons why Black women commit suicide?
I think it could be some of the same reasons that everybody commits suicide. But one thing is, what I see in my blue chair, which is my office, is a lot of Black women, like we say, we try to put this face on that we got it together. We got social media. We look on social media. Everybody got it together on social media. Everybody is doing the mostest, doing great, doing well, especially when you get with the ages of like 30 years old, 25 years old, you looking like, oh, this is how my life should be. I'm 25 or 26. I should be a millionaire at this time. I should be doing this, but I'm not where I thought I should be. And then you go down this rabbit hole of, I'm not good enough, all these negative thoughts of how my life is not meaningful. So just looking at the social media, just not being heard. When they tell somebody, hey, I'm struggling, it kind of get glossed over like, oh no, you'll be okay. You're the strong one. You all right. Don't worry. You're okay. The expectations that we put on ourselves, other people's not putting these expectations, but we put these expectations on ourselves, and we're not able to meet these expectations at this time. Not that we never will, but it's just not the right timing for it.
Right.
For
right.
these.
And I'm glad you hit on social media, because everyone is doing the most, but all you see is 1%, not even, of what is going on people's lives. And then we create this unfair standard that we hold ourselves to based on just the piece of what people are sharing about their lives and how that impacts our mental health. And this, we create this measure of perfection that does not exist. And we are so relentless with holding ourselves to this imaginary standard. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you. Please drop your
trauma.
Trauma.
Another reason is trauma.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Please drop your questions in the chat, and if you're watching us on social media, please put your questions there and we will get to them soon. So thank you for that, Felicia. So what preventative factors can we use to decrease the risk of suicide among Black women in particular, but then also in our communities in general?
Well, I want to say one thing is we know therapy and maybe seeing a psychiatrist to see those two work together. Another thing is having your tribe of women. When women come to my office, I'll always say, okay, who's your tribe? Who is your tribe? And what I find out is a lot of women don't have that tribe. They don't have that BFF. And even they do have that BFF only know them at a surface level. They really don't know them at all. So having someone to talk to is almost like that scripture where iron sharpen iron, somebody that you can connect with, that you can take your crown off and just be you and totally just be you.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say, hey, there's not therapists out there. My dogs might start having a fit because the UPS guy's coming out there. So just excuse that. But a lot of people say, I can't find a therapist. And, I think it's not, you have to look hard, but there are lots of therapists out there. There's lots of therapists of color too. And there's a few places where you can find them, but just having it, a lot of people have a hard time finding access to therapy. But there's places that you can get free therapy. A lot of the therapists are willing to help, and they will do pro bono. They might do sliding fee. They might not have a lot of slots for sliding fee, but if you don't have that conversation with them, you won't never know it.
Thank you so much. So where can we go to find more information about suicide and suicide prevention?
There's lots of places. One place that we talk about online that I absolutely love is this Therapy for Black Girls. That's like my go-to, especially when somebody else want to find access to other therapists all over the United States. They also, if you go to her website, she also have a podcast where she's giving out information week by week on different topics of mental health. You also have clinician of color. You can find therapists there. And your old faithful is Psychology Today. So if you can't find anybody on therapy of color or clinician of color or therapy for Black girl, you can go to Psychology Today. And in your local community, there's therapies there. There's your larger therapy agencies where if you were to ask, they'll provide free, well, not really free therapy, but therapy for people who don't have insurance.
Mm.
So
That's helpful. And Psychology Today, that's where I found my therapist, who is absolutely amazing. I am a huge supporter of therapy. And also, I know there's a hotline that has been this year launched by the Biden-Harris administration. I don't know, Lauren, you may have this in your your notes to share. So we'll wait, and then you can share that with the group. But this is helpful. I just wanted to. We're going to get to our Q&A. Some of this we'll answer along the way, and some of this we'll have a conversation about during our Q&A. Thank you so much for that. So how do we support our friends and our loved ones who are contemplating suicide, right? You know, a lot of times when I hear stories of people who have lost loved ones to suicide, I have lost family members to suicide. You don't realize until after the fact, and then you think back and you're like, gosh, okay, so there were some signs. We may not have known what they were, but how do you even start the conversation if you suspect something may be wrong? Somebody may be having a difficult time and could possibly be thinking about it. How do we support those loved ones, those friends, and even our colleagues, our coworkers?
And you know, it's really hard because it's like once you lose somebody to suicide, it's like you always think about, man, what did I miss? You know, what happened? And you know, it's so hard because sometimes you don't really see those signs, you know. And what we find is once people make up their mind to do it, they're not gonna really, sometimes they don't just tell people, hey, I'm gonna do this. But I think that guilt is really difficult for the people that they left behind. But some of the signs are they have a history of mental health, you know. They have always kind of struggled with depression and anxiety. Sometimes they will tell us, or they'll always talk about, you know, when they die, or they'll say things like, you know, I might not always be here for long. So they might say things like that. Sometimes look for if there's like a complete opposite, like if they've been like depressed all this time, then all of a sudden they start to feel like, oh man, that person had turned around. You know, it could be like, hey, they had turned around because they had decided to make they made up their mind. Always look for like substance use too, like alcohol. Those are a risk factor. One of the things is to support that person is to have an open, just talk to them. You know, and when people are going through it, they don't really always have to have a solution to their problems, but they just need somebody just to talk to, just to vent to. But if you do notice that, hey, I see that they really are struggling, start talking to them about like, hey, we need to, you're struggling. I don't want you to struggle by yourself. I don't know how much I can help you with. Let's help you find a therapist. And then and it's always good to model, you know, it's easy for us to say, hey, you need to go to a therapist. But sometimes you can say, you know what, my therapist says this.
Right.
You know, so model that how of the therapy, because if they know you going to therapist, kind of take the myth and be like, oh, I'm not the only one.
Right. And also dispelling the myth that if you talk to someone, something is wrong with you. You know, something is, you know, and then in addition to what you've already shared, you're weak. You know, if you can't handle the world's problems on your own, if you can't shoulder it on your own, you know, you're weak. And that does prevent us from it. It creates an environment where we are in isolation and we're not able to receive the support because we're thinking that we don't either deserve it or, you know, we are less if we go pursue it. So thank you so much for bringing those things to surface. So when should a person get help? When should a person get help, and who should they contact in crisis?
Okay. Well, I think that's like a two-part question. I always say people, they need to get help. I think we should normalize going to therapy. Like if there's a life situation, like you're like somebody dying, be like, look, you know what? I know this might be a difficult time for me. Let me go contact a therapist. Or so just kind of put therapy as a norm part of our life. So if these difficult times come up, you'll have that support system. But a lot of times, like I tell people, I said, I know I'm the last resort, especially now, not so much, but before, when I first started out, I know I was the last resort, because by the time people will actually pick up the phone and call a therapist, they have tried everything on their own. And it's like, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. Let me just call this therapist. So when they feel like, look, I have tried everything, I have talked to my friends, I have tried all these coping skills, call a therapist too at that point. When you're in a crisis, if you need you need a place to stay safe, because you're like, look, I don't trust myself, go to the ER, check yourself in. It's okay. But like, look, go to the doctor, go to the hospital and say, look, I need help. I need help. Help me. To reach out to a trusted friend, somebody that you can trust, and that not gonna judge you, and not gonna be like, well, I told you should have did blah, blah, blah. Reach out to your churches are beginning to be very open now, because they're getting educated too. So, reach out to someone in your church. Also, but I said, don't struggle alone. Reach out to someone.
Thank you so much. And Lauren did drop in the chat the 988 suicide hotline number. That is also a resource. So what can we do? Last question for you, from me at least, is what can we do to open up dialogue about suicide, both at home with our families and then also in our communities? How can we promote this conversation that we're happening right now?
I think, especially in our community, a lot of things is done in secret. When people get a diagnosis of cancer and they die, everything is just done in secret. People grieve in secret. When somebody's husband die or a close family member, they struggle in secret. But I think it's important that we really just be okay with letting people know, say, hey, I'm struggling with this, so we can make this, I wouldn't say a norm, but a norm. So other people say, okay, yeah, it's normal to sometimes feel this way. It's normal to seek help, and it's okay, and kind of break down these myths. And like people, there's a lot of situations can just bring you to a place where, man, I need help. And you don't know you don't know what situation is going to take you out. You know what I'm saying? You just don't know what it is. And what might seem like a little situation to some person could be a really big situation to you. It could be your kid going to college. That might be the thing that might just take you out. You might have just been strong all this time, but whatever situation it is, be okay with just naming it and just trying to get help and just talking to someone about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. And I see in the chat, we have some comments about, just the importance of doing this, even as Christians, and we'll talk more about that. And to your point, Felicia, I am so glad that the churches are realizing that you can't just pray these things away.
Yeah.
Right? And that faith without works is not fruitful. We have to do the work, and we have to pray, and we have to refer, as clergy, we have to refer our members of our congregation out to professionals, if we are not trained in mental health, if we don't have the learning, the degrees, to be able to do that, to be able to fully support, we have to tell people, no, you have to get help, and I can't do it for you, and that's okay. So I'm glad we're having these conversations. But yes, absolutely, Eugenia, in the comments.
Can I say something
More.
about the Christian, and there's also Christian counselors out there. I have like colleagues that they only specialize. I have colleagues like, look, she'll say like, look, I'm a Christian therapist, I only specialize in women of Christian belief, and they will use their model. They'll go with the scripture. So there are Christian counselors out there too. That's good to know. Thank you so much. And we'll talk a bit about how expensive it is. There's some comments about the cost, and that is a larger thing that needs to be discussed. And there's so many levels and layers to it. And Lauren might mention some of that as well. So we'll wait to hear from her. But actually, we're going to hear from you now, Sister Lauren. So thank you so much, Sister Felicia. Let me just say, Lauren wrote a piece in Sojourners magazine that literally brought me to tears. It was so compelling and powerful about her suicide prevention testimony. And after I saw that, I reached out to her before I even knew what this was going to be, what the program would look like, and asked her if she would share some of her story with us. So I am so honored to be able to facilitate conversation with you about your experience, Lauren. So with that, if you can share a bit about, share your testimony. When did you first, as a suicide survivor, when did you first attempt suicide, and how many times have you attempted suicide?
Yeah, hi. And sorry about my voice. I'm battling a bit of a virus, but I was actually in 7th grade when I made my first attempt. So that was when I was 12, and it was actually around this time of the year, because I traditionally get like an upper respiratory issue around this time of the year, and I distinctly remember at 7th grade, you're 12, and you know about suicide, and it's, at least my understanding was, this is a way to end how you're feeling. And I knew, at least from what I had seen or what I learned, that you just take a bunch of pills and then that's it. And so I had a bunch of my medication, antibiotics, right? But I was so desperate that I just took as many as I could swallow. And I remember just going to sleep and being like, this is it. But even at such a young age, when I was 12, and this kind of goes to what you were saying, Felicia, earlier about, there was just a sense of relief, right? I want people to understand that when you make the decision to die by suicide, or you take the step from just having a suicidal ideation or just a thought to actually being suicidal, it feels peaceful, because it feels like that is the only way to stop the pain. And the pain isn't just in your head, like it can sometimes physically hurt, right? Because the mental is physical. If your brain, as part of your brain is under stress, then the corresponding physical functions are also going to be stressed. And when that environment increases that stress, you just kind of go into a bit of a reverse coma. And of course, I woke up, but that was the first of about 15 actual attempts over the course of 20 years. So I'm 37 now. My first attempt was when I was 12, doing some hard, and I've been suicide free for 5 years. So that's the bulk of my life. I have been trying to end it. So yeah, that's it. I think saying that now, it's different, because when you're in the moment, it just seems very normal and you feel very detached from self. But I think now saying that, especially in the place of healing that I am, it brings back a lot of the pain that I felt. And I was in a lot of pain. So that, 12. It's, yeah. Sorry.
No, please take your time and this is,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't expect to get emotional. Sorry.
No, and you are not alone. And even in the chat, there are women who have your story. So many Black women feel you
Mm.
and have gone through not the alienation, the actual attempts.
Yeah.
I was reading about just how over the past 10 years, the numbers have been increasing at such a high rate. Black women and girls and younger women, younger Black women around the age that you shared. So this is a conversation that we have to have, and just your courage in being able to share your story that really does resonate is just very powerful. So thank you so much. So what factors led you to suicide? What sort of things might have influenced and just the chat is talking about generational and again we'll talk more about that, but if you could share.
Sure. And so uh, I think a lot of what Felicia said, I was like, check mark, check mark, check mark, check mark. I think growing up, there are these things called adverse childhood experiences, which are basically childhood experiences you have that are traumatic that can lead to short and long-term mental, physical, social functioning issues. And I had a few of those checked off going into this, and up until 7th grade. And then I think really what sort of tipped me over the edge, because I always remember feeling really lonely. I moved a few different schools, didn't really have a strong tribe growing up of solid folks that I could really be authentic, really be myself. It was always just sort of friendship by design, if you will. It was friendships of convenience. And it wasn't really friendships then, because for example, when we lived in Ohio, I knew I was going to leave, right? And so what's the point of really establishing strong friendships if I'm never going to return to Columbus, Ohio, if I'm going to go back home? I would say what happened around middle school, which is kind of, you are growing as a person, and that's where you have like a lot of your real identity issues come to play. You're starting to learn how to socialize in broader circles with much different people. And I was placed in a very hostile environment, an academic environment. I was going to a predominantly white school, and this was, before social media, but socioeconomically, like to have that sort of like, oh wow, like I don't want to say poor, but like, oh wow, there's a difference between the way that like, and I think to be confronted with that and not just have people have more means, I think for them to be really braggadocious, like, I mean, pardon my French, but like middle schoolers can be shits, right? Like, I don't know how else to say this. And so when you get middle schoolers who are sort of the embodiment of the white supremacist ideal, rich, white, young, the typical good looks, was blonde with blue eyes, being very smart, having these things. I mean, folks had Kate Spade bags and were getting caught. Like, it was too much. And it reinforced all of the messages of me feeling like I wasn't enough, to the point where it didn't just become passing things. It actually became the internal working model of how I saw myself in relation to others. And so I would say that it was that solidifying of like, you're not enough. You're always going to be an outsider. You're always going to have to try twice as hard to be just as good, and it's never enough. And trauma breeds perfectionism. Oftentimes perfectionism is a symbol of, a major symptom of trauma. And so to just have all that going in my head, it just became too much. It became overwhelming. I didn't want to deal with it anymore. I was tired of never feeling good enough. I was tired of never feeling like things were going to get better. And I think a lot of the things that were going on, I mean, the first time I remember when I was 5, I remember getting up on my little step stool and looking in the mirror. And I just remember seeing this beast and saying to myself, you are so ugly. And so to have sort of that conceptualization of self at 5 and to be in 7th grade and to all of a sudden have people sort of verify what was going on in my head, it was just a recipe for a disaster. And I think that there was certainly intergenerational components on both sides of my family. Mental health is a thing. And we know that, mental health access now is awful, like back then. And then, of course, you have sort of the cultural milieus of being Black in America, where you just put your head down and you keep going. Like, we are not allowed to be sad people. And sadness is a weakness. And sadness shows that you just, you're not Black enough or something. And I just had all of these risk factors. But I would say that the one protective factor that I had was my faith. In part because every time I woke up, and when I say suicide attempts, like I want to make it clear, like I wasn't just thinking these things, like I was attempting, and I have attempted in so many different ways. And every time I just, and this may be hard to hear, every time I just couldn't finish suffocating myself, or I couldn't cut deep enough, I would just sort of collapse and say, God, there's got to be something more than this. There's no way that you created me to suffer. And that thought, that tiny seed of hope is what is the reason why I'm here. But I didn't necessarily recognize it when I was going through that, right? All I knew was the pain. All I knew was the rejection. All I knew was feeling lonely. All I knew was not feeling good enough. And my environment, once my external environment started to reaffirm what was going on in my internal environment, it just was like, okay, this is the path that we're going to go on for 20 years. This is the path that we're going to struggle with for the next 20 years.
So powerful and moving, really. And so you mentioned your faith. How did your faith help you? And what other things helped you through those challenging times, even up until recent? What are some of those things?
Sure. So and now I say this and it sounds so like cliche and a little bit of like toxic positivity, but it really was, for at least me, my faith. And I think it was really rooted in my understanding of who God was. And I think it gets to that question, like, God, there's no way you created me to suffer. And it was just this inability to accept, even though the entire world made me feel like they would be better off not being here. I just could not, there was something in my brain. It was like my right brain and my left brain were arguing. And it was like, my right brain was like, this is too much. And my left brain was like, but God didn't create you for this. Like, there has to be something more than this. And then there were times when I just had moments where I could just be myself. And I didn't feel sad, and I can actually enjoy things. And to be able to have those moments in the midst of everything, it was just a balancing act. It was very precarious, but it was a balancing act. And I think for me, obviously, like really getting into therapy, intense therapy starting in 2014 really helped me, in part because I started to address some of sort of the social functioning issues and a lot of the cognitive issues that I was having, where all of a sudden I was starting to practice challenging my brain, where I would say, okay, am I really this stupid? Is this really my fault? I started understanding that maybe I should give myself a bit of grace. And I started to challenge whether my thoughts, emotions, and feelings were reality, and whether or not there could be another reality that existed. So again, I think I just had moments of hope. To me, the way that I ascribe this is where God showed up, even outside of my individual exchanges, where he was trying to tell me or saying, like, this is a life that I actually want you to live. And once I started deep therapy in 2014, I think that really, even though I was actively still suicidal, I think knowing and being able to see the progress that I had made, at least, and knowing that, like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I have more control over my emotions, thoughts, and feelings than I thought I did. I think that was really a turning point. But even then, my last attempt was in 2017, right? So I still had 3 years of going through this. But it really was, I mean, my faith, really. And I hate not being able to say my family, but I think a large part of my depression also told me that they would be better off if I wasn't here. And I had many times where I would tell my mom and dad, you need to let me go. And that in a week, you'll completely forget about me. And you'll realize that your life is much better when I'm gone. And so, you know, there was just really nothing that anyone could do or say to break me from this except God. And again, my understanding of God is a loving God, a God who doesn't create to hurt. And I know that some people's understanding of God is different. So I'm not saying that, like, if you cannot find solace in your faith, there's something wrong with you. But I think just that was the one thing that God was like, oh God, this poor child, like, let me let this one thing be the thing that keeps her anchored, that provides a safe haven and a secure base for her to return to, even when, again, the outside world is just telling her, like, you're useless, you're worthless, you have no value whatsoever.
Thank you so much, sister. Point of resonation, a lot of points that the women can say, I see myself in that part of it. I see myself in that part of it. And the courage to have that conversation and share, because that gives strength. That gives strength. And I'm just thanking you for sharing with us. Your strength and resiliency is just absolutely amazing.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I think it's also important to share. I think a lot of folks in the chat are talking about the stigmatization of mental illness, particularly in traditionally minoritized and intentionally underserved communities, which Black people in America fall within that. And I think that's part of the reason why I feel like it's very important for me to be very vocal, because, again, at 12, suicide was a very white problem, right? And that's a large part of the reason why I wasn't open about it, because I thought that there was something wrong with me as a Black person to be this sad, right? And I just kind of feel like the more that folks can look at someone, and I'm still healing, there's a lot to go, but the more that folks can know that you can get to a place of, I want to live, as opposed to, like, I want to die, I think it's important, because, again, it's that hope factor. Like, I really think that it's this standing as a counter to the reality that's been created in your head by your mental illness, by behavioral issues, by the world, and being able to say, in spite of all of that, you have been created for something greater. And the things that have happened to you, sometimes, and this is also a conceptualization that I've really worked out with, is sometimes, you know, people say that, why do bad things always happen to good people? And I really had to work through that, because I internalized some of that and felt like some of this is happening because I'm a bad person, right? And I think over the course of my healing and really my spiritual journey, realized that, again, if I'm saying that God doesn't create things to suffer, then I have to also accept the fact that God doesn't just let things happen to you, right? And this is weird for me to say, because this is a positive thing about myself. So I'm just really repeating what my dad says, is like, you know, your light sometimes is so bright that you pose an existential threat to the darkness. And so, of course, you're going to be under attack. Of course, they don't want your light to shine. Of course, it's better for the devil and all of his plans if you weren't here, if you don't actualize your full potential, if you don't grow up to not just have this bright light, but to be a light for others and to help other people keep their light on, then yes, you're going to consistently be under attack. And so I think also when I started to and this gets to another question, so I apologize if I'm talking much, but I'm also trying to think. But I think that just gets to the final point when I decided that I wanted to live, and when I decided that I was actually going to give it a shot, was my last attempt, and it was in September, October of 2017, and I had a really amazing therapist that I had found. At the time, therapy for Black girls was just starting, so the database was really small. But I knew that I wanted a Black woman who had some Christian background, so that way I could talk about my spirituality. And she happened to be incredibly connected in the mental health system in the DC area, and was able to actually get me into a treatment center for women who were suffering from PTSD related to sexual assault and sexual violence. And so there was some sexual assault. When I was 18, I was raped. And then again, it happened when I was 19. And so to go through that and to go through no treatment, to not even really remember them until the Brock Turner case came up, and it was so similar to what had happened to me that I actually started to have body memories. And she was able to get me a seat in the bed, and part of what I do now is to also help fund an infrastructure, so that way I see you guys talking about insurance, so that way insurance starts covering mental and behavioral health, telehealth services, because we don't have the infrastructure here. And that's why there's a lot of access challenges. And even the mental health system that we do have currently only serves the status quo, and the status quo is predominantly white people in America. And so it's not suited for the needs. It's not culturally sensitive. It's not culturally relevant for people like us who have very complex experiences as Americans and very complex access points into the system. And even getting into a system that's going to treat us as human beings and not just as a reimbursable number, right? And so I got very lucky that my doctor had access to this treatment center that it was a program that was explicit. It wasn't just a hospital that was going to drug me and then send me out. It was going to treat me. And I remember I had to wait a few days to get into a bed. And so it was like, how do we keep Lauren alive for essentially 2 to 3 days? And it became an all hands on deck thing with my parents, where they were watching me. It was very intense, like knives were gone. And I was too tired to leave the bed. So that kind of helped. And the night before I left, I remember I was sitting in this room. It was my old bedroom. And I was laying down, and my dad was praying next to me. And one of the worst feelings in the world is having your parents sit next to you and cry and be so sad and know that they're crying because of you. My dad was sitting next to me, and he was praying so hard, and he was on my right side. And this may sound crazy, but it's my reality. And I just remember feeling like this kind of darkness, like on my left side. And it really felt in that moment where it was like, the angel and the demon on your shoulders. It really felt like, okay, the devil was like, bet.
It's a warfare.
Right. Like, this is, I finally got this soul. Like, this is it. You got to make a decision. And I just felt in my heart and my soul, like, you have to make a decision. We cannot continue to straddle. Like, what is your choice? And I was begging my dad, and I was like, please just let me go. Please just let me go. Please stop praying. And he wouldn't stop praying. And in my head, I was like, okay, God. Like, seeing him got through to me. It was like, wait, maybe your parents do love you, because I was a part of it too. Like, that's what depression does to you. It's like, I would tell my parents, like, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't feel it. I think you're just having to say that because you have to say that as my parents. And I think for that moment, like, it just broke through, and I saw my dad, and I saw the pain, and I was like, he loves me. And I was like, okay, God, I'm going to do this. If you are real, and if you really are here and you have something better for me, then I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to staying alive and wanting to stay alive. And I'm going to commit to fighting, and I'm going to commit to fighting for life and fighting against the things inside of me that tell me that the world is better off if I'm not here. And so that's kind of, it's a very supernatural, surreal, spiritual moment. But I think, when you make a promise to God, you try not to go back on it. And it's not to say that it's easy. There's time, when I learned in the hospital, I think it was like 70 to 80% of people have suicidal like ideations, or just the thought of like, oh, it'd be better if I'm not here, or oh man, that bus hit me, too bad. Those kinds of things are actually kind of normal. Suicide is not the norm. So I still struggle with that, because healing is a lot harder than hurting. And they don't tell you that. And they don't tell you that the healing journey is not linear. It's a lot of peaks and valleys. It's a lot, this is a bad analogy probably, but it's a lot like substance use, where you take one step forward and 5 steps back. But in that 5 steps back, it's given me an opportunity to think about the things that have been holding me back. And I have been very lucky and very blessed to have access to amazing mental health supports. I have been very lucky and very blessed to have insurance that completely covers it. I highly recommend for folks to look through the exchange, depending on where you are, at least in the DMV area. Blue Cross Blue Shield has amazing mental and behavioral health coverage. And if you can get an exchange plan through Care First or Blue Cross Blue Shield, at least in this area, most providers take it and cover it. But again, even then, care is expensive. When I was in the facility, my insurance covered 90% of the stay per day, but I still owed like $100 every day. So when I got out, I remember, thinking I'm going to go home with my mom. And they were like, no, you have to go to the financial aid office. You owe us $1,400. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, so there's a system that treats you like a number. And then you have to create a system that treats you like a human being. And I am very lucky to have that. And I recognize that it's very difficult. And so again, I think that that's part of the reason why I'm so open about this, is one, to get hope to people, but then also to connect to people and understand the challenges that they're having to getting to this space. So that way, using my platform as a political director, someone who is able to influence federal legislation, particularly in the health arena, how can I then take that lived experience to change the system in a way and it's actually responsive to more people. It's actually responsive to the people that feel like they've been left out or left alone, because it's not the case. And I also worry that the voices that are influencing the system, again, don't look like you and I. And so that always becomes a problem, because whether people want to admit this or not, there are more than two Americas. There's multiple Americas, and our lived experience is rarely reflected in these policies. And so to the extent to which we can bring these real life experiences to folks and get them to realize, like, wait a minute, we do need radical change. We do need a radical reimagining of what mental and behavioral health care looks like. I think that is the answer to why I was like, God, like, what is the point of having me here? And so when I made that promise to God, like, it was a big one. And so I feel like to feel like I have a purpose through all of my pain, and to feel like I have a testimony, keeps me going, because again, like, you try not to break your promise to God, to the best of my abilities.
Lauren, I'm going to save this chat and send it to you so you can see all the love
Oh,
in this chat. These are some women who know you, some women who have never met you before, but can feel your beauty. The work of God working through you, because there's someone here that is either on this Zoom or on social media that is getting, that is at that point, and they are hearing your testimony and they are seeing there is life after this thought, wanting to do this in this moment. And they are hearing Sister Felicia's resources, and they are going to go and call 988, or they're going to go and try to find a therapist, or they're going to call their friend and be transparent and honest with their friend about what's going on. So that is a powerful thing. So I wanted to
thank you.
For that. The policy piece, we do have to have another conversation about that, a separate conversation, because that is a huge conversation. Very important. We see it at both ends, right? Because I was also doing research on, the numbers, right? How many Black women are committing suicide, and what do those numbers look like? And just the lack of information, it's really disheartening. A lot of the suicides are unreported, right? They're unreported. or they're being misclassified as something else, when the autopsy is done and the coroner is, so a lot of the information we don't even have about how we are experiencing this. And that is something that we need to advocate for. At that point, Lauren, thank you. She just dropped in her article about her testimony that I encourage everyone to read. Last question that I have for you is about hope, and some of you touched on this. What words of encouragement, wisdom, or hope can you share with the women on this call, or women who are viewing, that are going through their own journeys toward healing after attempting suicide, and then also those that are dealing with thoughts of suicide? What can you give them to?
Yeah, I think one, just please know that you aren't created for this suffering. Like, it's real, and the things that have happened to you are real, but you don't deserve it. That you do have value, and that there are people who see you and want to meet your needs just because you exist. There are people who care about you just because you exist, and they may not be in your immediate circle, but they do exist. There are people like Felicia Johnson, who, and I guess someone who just got her master's, like the BSW, MSW, like, who go through quite a bit to be in a position to want to help, and that there are people who are actively trying always to try to make life a little easier for you. I think for me, one of the things that I did is I have a tattoo, and it's a semicolon tattoo. It's a semicolon project where, suicide is like a period. It's your life is a sentence, and then you end it, and then it's done. But when you survive suicide, it's a semicolon. And you get to rewrite your sentence, and that there is possibilities for you to rewrite your sentence. And I think a lot of this is predicated on the verse that I got. It's Isaiah 43:2, and it's just this reminder, again, if you are, and I think we can say this because it's Women of Praise, so I'm assuming we've all got a little God in us, but Isaiah 43:2 came to me a few months before my first hospitalization, and it is, you will walk through the waters, but I am the Lord your God. Like, I have you. You will walk through the rivers, and you will not be overwhelmed. You will walk through the fires, and the flames will not harm you. You will not be burned. And then it goes on to say, I'm the Lord your God. I always love you. I will always be there. Like, I will bring down nations for you. And it was this promise that, like, you're going to walk through the fire, and you're going to walk through the waters, but God has you. And just know that God does have you, and that even if you don't feel like praying, there's someone that's praying for you, like my dad was. Like, I am for you. And there are people who are working to make your life better. And so just, if you can, throughout the day, just take 5 minutes to yourself, to just be yourself, even if it's walking outside and grounding yourself, feeling the air, smelling the flowers. If you can't smell them, go get a COVID test. Just doing something that makes you feel alive, even if it's for 5 minutes. Like, where is that hope? Find your hope, find your anchor. And just know that your current situation is not an indication of what you deserve, right? And know that if you feel particularly under attack, maybe the reason isn't because you're a bad person, but maybe the reason is because what God has planned for you is so great that you are such a threat to the darkness. And know that that is how deep your value is. And know that you do have value. And those things, it's a lot easier said than done. But yeah, that's just what I hope that I can leave folks with from someone who's coming out on the other side of that. I think I can say that confidently now. And yeah, I mean, there's people that are working to make it better for you and your loved ones.
Amen. Thank you, love. I see a lot of preach, sis. I see a lot of in the chat. Thank you so very much. And some of us are parents too. And wow, Lauren, your father, what a great example of supporting you in so many ways, right? And praying for you, but not only praying for you, also helping you get the support and the resources that you need to journey through your healing.
And I also, sorry, I'd be remiss, like, shout out to mom, right? Because
Yeah.
when I was my first hospitalization, I lost everything. I lost my job, I lost my apartment, like I had nothing. But for my mom being able to take me in, and that's a huge privilege because that doesn't always happen. So that's why I also recognize that it's a privilege. My mom took me in and took care of me. And I don't, if she hadn't been able to do that, like I would not be here. And so, like, the fact that my mom just kind of like soldiered on and swallowed her own emotions about this and just was like, I have to take care of my baby, even though I was 32, like that was huge. And my dad helped me, but my mom like really, really helped me too, because she gave me the things that I needed and the space that I needed to heal. And that is a good chunk of why I'm here. And yeah, so I can't let
Mama out.
I know we can't. I call Grace. I can't let Grace go without just recognizing. She was the one that took me to the hospital twice. So she played a huge role in this, and the faith that I have is also because of how she raised me spiritually as well. And so, that's a large reason why I'm alive today. So she's given birth to me continuously and sustained my life. Like, she is a lifelong mom. And that is a blessing and a gift. And I saw Eugenia, sorry, you just made a comment about how you heal and deal with, the fact that you may have, incurred some trauma on your kids. The best thing you can do is just to heal, right? Because as your children are healing, they're going to be growing emotionally, behaviorally, mentally. And to be able to do that alongside each other when your healing process goes in tandem is really powerful. Because then you both have the tools to start unpacking some of that, and you both start to acquire the social emotional language, because a lot of this is about language, being able to express how you really feel and express how things were going. And so just sort of an extent, if you can't love yourself, how the hell you gonna love anyone else? Like, if you can't heal yourself, you're not going to be able to address or help heal with your kids. So that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you so very much. You have your testimony has blessed a thought. And Sister Felicia, I wanted to give you the final word.
I know a lot of people was talking about access to therapy. I always say just reach out. There's lots of agencies. If you don't have any insurance, they'll be able to provide you a trained therapist. Some agencies, the bigger ones, they have interns. Maybe see if they have an intern that can help you, but you'll still be up under a guidance of a therapist. Like I said, a lot of people do it pro bono, sliding fee, but don't use that. There's access to therapy. And then another place is try your EAP, Employee Assistance Program. At least that's 3 to 6 sessions, but sometimes you're gonna need more, but at least it gets you into the door.
Well, thank you so much. And 988 is the number to the suicide hotline. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sister Felicia. Thank you, Sister Lauren. Thank you to all of you who took the time out of your day to join us. I hope this was as impactful for you as it has been for me. You all have a good one, and we look forward to our next conversation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
Lauren, I teared up. I was like,
yeah, me too.
Oh, no.
Such a beautiful testimony.
Yeah.
It's literally, Felicia, it's because I had a licensed clinical social worker as my therapist, and she was a Black woman. And so I just hope, you know that you have probably touched or saved someone's life, like, or started them off on a journey in a way. And I don't know how you do it, especially in the pandemic, but I am so, so grateful for the social workers that can get in and do the tough work, because it's not easy at all. But you matter so much as a Black practitioner. You matter so, so, so much.
Oh, yes.